Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Josh Does Coding. In today's video, we are going to be going over sphere traces, how you can use them, and why you should use them. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is create a new actor, and I'm just going to call this BP underscore sphere trace example actor. So in a previous Blueprint 101, we went over line traces, and sphere traces are similar. So if we right click here and search for, that's not how you spell sphere. If we search for sphere trace, you'll see we have sphere trace by channel, sphere trace by profile, and sphere trace for objects. And then we also have a multi version of each of those. So in general, a channel will search for a trace channel. If you do a sphere trace by profile, you can look for a profile. And if you do sphere trace for objects, you can search for specific object types, which would be like world static, dynamic, etc. So we're just going to go ahead and use a sphere trace by channel. Now the difference between sphere trace by channel and multi sphere trace by channel, and this goes for all the other types as well, is that when you use a single sphere trace, it will return the first hit or the first blocking hit. As for the multi, it will return every single actor that is hit. So you see the sphere trace by channel gives you a single out hit. The multi-trace gives you an array of out hits for each actor that was hit. Setting these up is the exact same. So we'll just use the regular sphere trace by channel as an example. So for the sphere trace by channel, you have to give it a starting location. So for that, we'll make it this actor's location. You need an endpoint, which for me, I'm also going to leave as the actor's location because we're just going to search for a radius around this actor. This is typically how sphere traces are used in my experience, though you are free to add a different endpoint, of course. So let's say we'll make this radius 512 units around this actor. We will search for something with visibility. You can also make a camera, or you can use a custom channel like we did for the line trace. You can choose whether to trace for complex collision or simple collision. For the most part, you're going to want to trace for simple collision. Actors to ignore. Say you want this trace to ignore specific actors, you can make an array of actors to ignore. So for example, in a game, you could say that this ignores all trees and all rocks in it. That way, if a tree or a rock has this trace channel, the visibility trace channel, it will still ignore it anyways. For draw debug, this allows you to actually see a visualization of this sphere trace in editor. So I'm going to leave it persistent just so that you guys can see a visualization of it. Ignore self is whether this sphere trace should detect this actor or not. So if it is true, the sphere trace will ignore this actor and all of its components. And then this trace color is the debug color for if it does not hit something, and this is the trace color for once it hits something. And if you do for duration, that is set by this draw time. Now, on the other side of things, our outputs, we have a branch. This will return whether or not you hit something. So typically, you'll want to add a branch here, or so you have a Boolean, which you'll want to use in this branch to check if you hit something. And then if you did hit something, you can access the out hit. So you can drag out the out hit, you can break hit results, and now you get a whole bunch of variables you can mess with, whether it was a blocking hits, the initial overlap, the time, the distance, the location, all of this good stuff. So what I'm going to do, just as an example, is I will get the hit actor, and I will get display name. Then I'll just add a print string, and I'll hook up this get display name into this print string. So, say this was a grenade. This is an example of when you might want to use a sphere trace. If you have a grenade in your game, you could, I mean, in that case, you would probably want to use the sphere trace multi to get an array of everything hits. But then you can get the hit actor for each of the out hits and, tell us to take X amount of damage or whatever you might do when that grenade explodes. But for this example, I'm just going to add a print string so that we can see it working. So if we go ahead and add this sphere trace into the level, I will just add a cube as well so it has something to hit. And I'll just make sure that this cube's collision is set to block the visibility channel. It is. So now if we run this, you can see the sphere trace. Sorry, we'll ignore the character. You can see the sphere trace, and it's actually hitting the floor first. Right now you can see it hits the floor, and since it returns the first blocking hit, it will ignore the cube. Now if we move this guy up a bit, you can see it hits the cube before it hits the ground. So right here in the top corner you get cube. Now if we come back to our blueprint, I'll show you an example of using sphere trace multi. So like I said, it's very similar. The start and the end will be the same. The radius will be the same. The visibility, we're going to same. Trace complex, same. Actors to ignore, same. Draw debug, we'll once again make this persistent. Ignore self, again, is the exact same thing. Trace color, and draw time. All the same variables as our sphere trace by channel. Except now, if we hook this guy up, we get this out hits instead of a single out hit. So what we can do, I'll just dehook everything from here. If we go ahead and just drag this branch up, we'll just ignore this stuff for now. What we can do is we can do a for each loop. So for each actor in this out hits array, we can first check that it is valid. Oh, sorry, we're doing this backwards. We'll want to check that we hit something first, and then if we hit something, we can do a for each loop. So we'll go through each hit in this array, and we can just go ahead and do the same thing of printing the string. So again, this would be an example of something like a grenade where you want to hit everything in the area, where this is just if you want to check for one specific object. So now when we go to our level and we drop it down and we simulate, you can see we now hit both the cube and the floor. We can also add in a sphere and a cylinder, and you can see we hit everything in its radius. So that is the basics of a sphere trace. I hope this video helped you guys out. If it did, be sure to leave a like. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. Feel free to leave any questions down below in the comments. And with that said, I hope you guys have a good day and good luck with your games.